This video, we're going to be going over activity 1, 2, 3, which is the Apple Avalanche. In this video, I'm going to be showing you just the very, very basic code. This is for part 1, the code that we want to end up having. And so we're going to go ahead and begin with just entirely blank Python file. I'm going to start from scratch. We do have this Apple image though that we downloaded from PLTW, as well as this background image here, as well as this pair image. So we're going to be using those. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create a new file here. And actually, if I bring up that untitled 1, we can end up saving it in here. But we want to make sure, guys, that you are in the folder that contains all of your images, right? So they all should be in that folder. And then what we're going to do is file open folder. We're going to open the folder that contains all of these. You literally should just see where it has your activity 1, 2, 3 folder, and then it has all your images in there. Okay. If you don't have that being the case, you're going to get that no file or no directory found. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to name this Apple_1. That's what the etext informs us to do. If we end up typing in .py, I'm going to press Control S, and then now we get prompt to save this. Since I'm on a Mac, it looks like this. Now I can press Control A to select all, then delete to delete that. What we're going to be using in here is going to be import turtle as TRTL. We're going to also be importing random in here as well, so import random as RAND. We're also going to be importing string as, and I'm going to actually just keep it as import string. We're not going to import it as anything. What we're going to also do is we're going to set our Apple image. Now this is going to be the apple_, apple.gif right there. And so that's going to be the actual file name of our Apple. We got the ground height here. So I'm going to establish this to be negative 200. We're going to also have the Apple_letter and then X offset. Now that's what the etext tells us. If we use font number 55, our font value 55, then these are going to be the correct offsets. So we're just going to go ahead and put this in here. I'm going to select that drop down. Gosh, it seems like I am not able to do that. And I'm going to switch this from X to Y here. So they tell us the offset in the X-axis will be negative 25, then we got negative 50 in the Y-axis. Then we got screen. So we can also mess with the screen width. So I'm going to put that in here so we get a specified screen width. That looks good. That's going to match our backdrop, our background image. We're going to have height be 400 as well. Then what I'm going to also do, later on, you're going to use 5 apples in here. So for right now, I'm just going to have one single apple though. So I can put down this number of apples. We can save that as 5. We'll come back to that. This is what it'll eventually have, but 1 at first, right? So then we're just doing 1 in here though. Then we got the Apple letters. So this is eventually you're going to end up using this list here, right? And then we're going to also have an Apple list. So that's going to be a list of all the apples. We're not using that yet, right? We're going to have a current letter. That's what we're going to use here. And I'm going to have that be equal to a period currently. And then letter underscore list. This is what is going to be all of our current letters. Now, as you can see, line 3, we have the string module. We're going to bring that in because what we can do, instead of actually putting in all the letters in the alphabet, we can end up using the string module. If we do .ASCII, we can put uppercase in there. And then this is going to actually get us all uppercase letters in the alphabet and converts to list. So just as we were talking about, we had str, and then in parentheses we had int, we had float. All of those, they converted it to a specific data type. If you use list, then you put something in parentheses, it's going to actually take that and it's going to convert it to a list. And so right here we have a string, and it's going to convert all of those individual values to a list here. So we have the letter list. What I want to do next is I'm going to create my screen. So I'm going to do trtl.screen. Another thing that I want to end up doing is I want to use the setup. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my width equal to 1, and then also the height equal to, sorry, this is 1.0 here. So we need the float in there. What I'm also going to do is wn.add shape, and then we're going to add in the shape of that Apple image. So we had Apple image here set as this. So I'm going to go ahead and add that shape. That's so that we can use that for our actual Apple. I'm going to also set up that background picture. So the background picture, remember, that's this guy right here, background.gif. If I right click this, I can use the relative path. And so if we do that, we can toss that in there. So that's the background image. I'm going to also set tracer be equal to false. And so this allows us sudden updates to occur, so it's not going to actually be tracing out what Turtle's animations are. So let's go ahead and let's next pop down to the bottom here. And so we're going to create the actual active apple. So I'm going to go active_apple equals, and then I'm going to go trtl.turtle. I'm going to put that in here. We're going to set the shape, so that's going to be the argument of shape. We're going to set that equal to Apple image. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to tell the active Apple to go pin up, so I'm going to use PU. You can also write out pin up, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this reset Apple function pass in the active apple. Now we have not created that yet, so I'm going to just comment this out currently. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use onkeypress. Now, as we'll remember, onkeypress, that's the new function that we're using here. And what we can do is we can specify a certain function that's going to be called whenever we use that, right? So whenever we drop the apple, it should be whenever we press A, right? So I'm going to have that. I'm going to also tell the window to listen, and then we're going to also use trtl.mainLoop, or we can use wn.mainLoop. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Make sure we have the parentheses on there. This will give me an error as well, so I'm going to comment that out because of the fact that we do not have the drop apple function created yet. So if I run this, what you're going to end up finding is that we just have the background image show up there, right? So let's go ahead and let's get ready to begin then, okay? So in terms of this, we do need to create our functions, okay? So let's run this again one more time here. Okay, so nice. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start by creating our functions here. So what I have here is going to be the reset apple function. Reset apple. What I'm going to have my code end up doing is it is going to only execute. So we have the length of, or we have the letters list, right? So the letters list. What they end up telling us in the e-text is that this code should only execute if the letters list is not equal to 0. So we're going to have our functions here. I'm going to define reset apple, reset underscore apple. So now we're going to pass into this the active apple. So you can see down there we pass in active apple. I'm going to put colon there, and then I'm going to make letter global. So letter, that's going to be our actual current letter. And so we're going to end up finding out where that is. Now, the length of the list, we're going to end up doing that length of list equals, and then we can go len, and then we can use letter list. Now, len, remember, is how we find the length of a list. So if the length is equal to 0, then that means we don't have any letters left, right? And so if the length underscore of list is not equal to 0, then what I want to end up doing is I want to run into this code where we're going to create this actual apple. So we're going to get not only the letter, the random letter, we're going to also have it go to random coordinates, and then we're going to also draw that apple and then draw the letter as well on there. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's begin here. So different ways. What I want to do first is get the random letter. Okay, now two different ways of how you could do this. The first option I'm going to show you, we're going to get an actual index here. Now what I can do is I can go rand.randint, and so are we importing this as rand? Yeah, so we can go rand dot, and then we can go rand int, okay? Now the range of values that we should have is going to be 0, that is the first element, and then we can go to length of, and then I can go, or actually we could just put in length of list here, right? Length of list. And then we want to subtract that by 1 to make sure that we're getting just the last value. If we end up putting in just length of list there, we're going to run into an index out of range whenever we end up calling this. So then now what I'm going to also do is I'm going to get the active apple. I'm going to tell it to go to random spots. So we're going to say go to, and then I'm going to go rand int. So rand, we can go rand.rand int. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate this. And so now what we can do, let's actually take this here. We're going to go here, random x equals, and then we're going to have random y equals. Now random x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify this. It has to be an integer. So we're going to go random dot rand int, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here a negative value. I'm going to make sure that we end up with an integer value though for this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here negative, and then I'm going to put in my screen width for the x-axis. I'm going to divide that screen width by 2, and then I'm going to put in the comma, and then I'm going to go to a positive screen width divided by 2 there, okay? And so now let's make sure that we have, yep, okay, so we've got that. So now I'm going to go to this random y. Now for the y, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. The very bottom part of this, and we can actually replace this, so this would be screen height. So what in the world just happened? We can put down in here screen height divided by 2. Now on this, if we specify the ground to be at a certain distance, I'm going to change this. I'm going to take the ground value, and then I'm going to add 30 to that. Now I am running into an issue there with ground because that is not a global. So we can end up establishing grounds. Let's see here, what do we call that? Ground height, that's what it is. So let's put ground underscore height. And so now we've got that. So now ground height plus 30, that'll make sure that our ground height is going to be a little bit above that, right? So that we don't have a turtle just, or an apple just show up like right at the ground. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in this random x value, and then I'm going to also put in this random y value here. And so our active apple is going to go to that. Now, one of the other things, okay, so we did have the pin up, so we are all good for that. I was wanting to make sure that we had the pin up. So that's going to get it to go to those random coordinates, right? And so now if we try this out, we can try this out. Let's see here. So we are running into an issue here. So index float object cannot be interpreted as a integer, so float. So what I'm going to do, so let's see here. So that's in, what line is that in? Random x. So random x. Let's put this in here too, int. So it seems like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, so actually take this guy out. I shouldn't have the int in there from the get-go. These just need to be integers here. So this is returning this as a float value by using a rand.randint, and so we got to convert that to an integer. Let's try this out again. It is once again giving us an issue. Why is that giving us the issue? This is so interesting. Random x. So object, oh, so I'm wondering, maybe we've got to convert this to be an integer starting off, yep. And then this has got to be an integer here, so maybe we got to just add in the integer. I think that's what it is. It's telling me that it's having this issue here. Let's just make sure that both of these are ints. So int, and then extra parenthesis there. Let's try this out now. Okay, nice, so it was giving us that issue. Okay, so now what I'm seeing is that we don't have our actual apple showing up just yet. So let's see here, so reset apple, active apple. Oh, it's because we have tracer set to false, so we do need to do update in here. So just as we were talking about, tracer is not going to actually show any updates to the window until we hit update again. So if tracer is false, we got to use update to actually get that to show up. And so now we can see that we have our apple there, right? So now we got the apple. And so now we can go ahead and continue with this. And so we've got this guy set up. Let's go ahead and let's continue coding this out. So now what I want to end up doing with this apple is we've got it to go to that specific spot. What I want to do now is I want to get our letter to also show up. So I want to go letter equals, now if we had this index here, that's going to allow us to actually use the pop function. So if I end up using my letter list, I can do .pop, and then what I can pass in there is going to be the index. Now what this is going to do is assign a letter from our letters list, add a random index, and delete it, right? After we assign it to letter. So if we pop it off, it's going to delete the letter from that list, and then it's going to assign it to our letter. And so we've got that letter now. And so then what we can do next is we can call a function to draw the apple. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put draw underscore apple. And then what I can do is I can pass in my active apple function. Now this is giving us an error. Why is that? Because we do not have the actual draw apple function in here. Okay, so draw apple, we're going to pass in active underscore apple here, and then now we can put the colon in there. And so now for our draw apple function, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this wn.update here, and what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to actually cut that. So we're going to cut this, we're going to put it in the draw apple. That way it's not actually going to update this until we get to the draw apple function. Okay, now while we're in the draw apple function, I am going to do some things. I'm going to make sure that our active apple does have the shape of the apple image, and so we can go ahead and put that in here. So shape equals, then we're going to put in there, let's see here, so active apple's being sent into their perfect shape equals, and then we're going to go apple underscore image. And then now what I can do is I can show that turtle. So we're going to go active apple.show turtle. Now, why are we doing the show turtle? It's because we're later going to end up using this function to redraw the apple as well. So we're going to have the apple fall down. It's going to disappear, right? And then we want it to re-show up at this next spot, right? So we're going to do show turtle. And then next, what we can also do is we're going to call the draw letter function. And so from here, this is going to be the function that's actually going to draw our letter. Now, the letter is going to be on top of the active apple, and so that's why I'm going to pass in the active apple too. After we've drawn that letter, then we want to actually update our window. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create our draw letter function. So draw underscore letter, and then we're going to pass in the active underscore apple. And so now in the draw letter function, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to actually get the active apple. I'm going to set the color to be white, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have saved position. And so now what we can do is active apple.pos, right, for position. And then now what I can do is active apple dot, and then we can set the position, right? So, or we can do go to. And then now on here, what I want to do is I want to find, so saved position. I want to reference the first item in there, and then I'm going to add in that apple x offset. Now what I also want to do is find the saved position. I want to get the first, or the first index, which is the second element. Then I'm going to add in the apple letter y offset. So remember, they gave us this in the actual e-text. They told us if you use a font, the specific font Arial, and if you have your font be set up at 55, then these will end up working for you. So we're going to test that out. This might actually be for 74 is what I think I switched it up for. So you might have to make some minor changes for that part if you end up doing a different size. But anyways, we've got those set up. And so now what we can end up doing is we have our active apple, and then we're going to tell it write. So we're going to tell it write, and then we're going to go letter. So we want to write the letter that we actually are currently on. And then what we also want to end up doing is we want to set our font. So we're going to set the font to be in a tuple. That's what this variable type or data type is here. I'm going to go 74. Yeah, so I did have it as 74 instead of 55. So your offset values might be different if you use 55. And then what I'm going to do at the very, very end, since we had it go to that offset position to write that letter, I'm going to actually have it go back to, and then it's going to be saved position. And then I'm going to call that as 0. And then we're going to also go saved position and then 1. Okay. So we're going to end up doing that. Now, could it work if we put save position in there? Possibly too. Let's test this out. Instead of like referencing those indexes, we're going to test and make sure that our code works here. If it works, then we're gonna end up taking this out. We're gonna try to just put save position on that list and see if it'll take that. Anyways, I can run this code now. So we are getting a issue here. So active apple.shape. So I was kind of being silly here. So active apple shape is just apple image. That was a silly mistake on my end. So did you guys, I don't know if you guys saw that. Let me undo that. Let's go back in the terminal. I'm going to show you. So how did I know that it was occurring there? Active apple.shape. See how it says line 40? Line 40 is right here. Shape equals. We're already specifying the shape. So we're just going to keep it as that. Now let's run this code again. Okay, so now let's hear it. Has no attribute show turtle. Did you mean show turtle? Yep. Another silly mistake. How did I know it was there? See how it says line 41? Active apple dot show turtle. Perfect. Let's try this out again. Now we got F to show up. Now, is it the case where if I press A, it's going to drop this apple? No. All we did so far is we set this up so that we'd have an apple show up that is a random letter, right, from a list. It's going to pop it off and it's going to delete that. And then it has to drop now, right, once we press just the letter A. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up that part of the functionality of this code. So now, this guy right here on Keypress, we're going to end up using that. It's going to call drop apple, and then it's going to have in quotes A there. So what I'm going to do now is in our function setting, or the function section, that's what I meant there, we're going to define drop underscore apple. Okay? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually set the tracer to be true. Now, why am I putting it as true? It is so that we can end up seeing the apple actually drop. I think that that's going to make our program a bit more fun. So I'm going to get it so that it'll show us dropping it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do index. And then so now what we can do, guys, is we got to find in our apple letters, we got to find the actual index. So dot index of the letter, right? And so now, oh, actually, hold on. Am I getting, yeah, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so we're not going to do that one. What we're going to do, that's what you'll have to do later on. We're going to end up going ahead and clearing the active apple, right, because it has that text on there, so we're going to clear that. And then let's just run this for fun. Let's see what happens right now, right? We should be testing this often after we make the changes, so let's run this. It's you. I'm going to press A. Do you guys see how that gets cleared now? Perfect. So that cleared. Now what we've also got to do is we've got to get our active apple to actually go down, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go active apple.go to, and then now what I want to do is I want to have it go to, it's going to retain its X coordinate, right? It's going to keep that, but then the Y coordinate needs to be the ground height, right? We only want movement in the Y axis if we save the X coordinate value of that and we just tell it to go down. So if you tell it to go down to a point that has the same X coordinate but a different Y coordinate, it'll end up doing that. So it'll just move in the Y axis there. So now we've moved that. Then what I want to do is I want to actually hide the turtle after it's gone there, right? So we're going to hide turtle. Then I'm going to set the tracer equal to false because these next steps I do not want to show being updated, right? And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the reset apple function again. Before I call that though, we're going to go ahead and we're going to comment this out. So I'm going to run this. So we got A on here. Perfect. As you were able to see, our apple ended up falling, right? Let's try running our code again just to make sure everything looks good, everything is good. We got B there, it's showing up at a different spot. We got A now, we're calling that, it's dropping, okay? Now, whenever we created that reset apple function, we set it up in a particular manner so that we could call it again here, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call the reset apple function again, okay? So now let's test out our code, let's see what happens here. So we got P here, I'm gonna press A, boom, it drops. Now, we end up running into this issue. What's happening? We don't actually have the apple showing up again. So let's try pressing A. Yeah, nothing's happening here. Okay, so we are having some issue. Now reset apple needs to take one positional argument, which is active apple. So what is the issue that we have here? Line 58, look at it. What did we forget to do? We forgot to add in active apple, right? And why did I have to do that? It is because the reset apple function, there's this parameter active apple, so we need to pass that in, all right? So what I was trying to do is kind of model for you guys, you know, if you end up getting these errors, how we can end up going about fixing them. So line 58, for instance, right there, you can see it right here, right? Let's say line 691. It's also going to say line 1968, right? So the reason why it's doing that, the turtle module does reference other code, right? And so as you can see, it's in the actual turtle Python module. So in turtle Python module, line 691 has the code that we're using, right, in line 58 of our code. So if we go to line 58, that was the reset apple function. And so line 58 here is expecting that parameter, okay? So that's why we had to fix that. So you might end up seeing these crazy line numbers. If that doesn't correspond to your line number or this Python file that they're referencing and this file path, right, this absolute file path, if that is not your current Python file, then just keep going down until you see the absolute path of the current Python file you're working on. Then it's gonna say line whatever, and it should contain a line number that is in here, okay? So now that I've solve that issue, let's try running our code again. Let's see if everything works as expected. We've got Q here. Remember, I'm going to press A on my keyboard. I'm not going to press Q, right? It's just set up currently for A. So if I press A, sweet, we had a new apple show up at a new coordinate and it has a random letter, right? So it's a random coordinate, random letter, random coordinates, maybe I should say. We've got V there, we've got T. Now, one of the things I don't like about this though is it still seems like our Y values are pretty close to the ground there. So I'm gonna actually increment this even more for that. So that is one change I'm gonna make. So let's see here. So the drop apple, no, we don't want that. We want it for the reset apple, right? So I had plus 30, let's put in plus 60. So let's try that out again. I am making this change because I don't want my apples to show up too close to the ground, because then, you know, especially once we have all these apples, it's not going to be as fun because they're not going to be dropping. Now, another thing, you know, apples are showing up like over here maybe sometimes. It would be a good idea to just try to keep it all like on the tree even. That could be kind of cool. So it's more like we're picking them from the tree rather than it showing up in this random spot. So that's another thing you could try to end up doing too with your code. But that is the completed code that you need for this. And as you can see, we went all the way through the alphabet there. So now we don't have any other letters that we can end up using since the length of that list, just like we said in here. If the length of the list is not equal to 0, then we'll go into that code. Now, if this ends up being false, we're not going to run this code. All right. Anyways, hope that was helpful for this activity 1, 2, 3, getting the single apple to drop. Catch y'all in the next video. In the next video, which there, we're going to set it up so that we're going to have 5 total apples that are going to be dropping. So 5 apples are going to be on the screen at a time. But anyways, see y'all later. Bye-bye.